Hey Mike, it's Clayton here.
Yeah, he is linked, so he's calling in, right? Oh, good, thanks. We're ready to go.
Mike, can you hear us over here? Can you hear us down there?
Yeah, can you hear us?
Yes, you can, nice and clearly.
Okay, good, thanks. We're getting ready right now.
Okay, when will you be ready?
Yeah, just give me 1 second.
All right, just let us know when you're ready, okay, Mike?
I guess we're ready whenever you are.
Okay, I think we'll be starting right now then, if you guys are okay to start.
Go ahead.
Good. All right, great. Okay, so hi everyone. My name's Monsi. I am the president here at Davis Suzuki's debate team. So it's nice to be connecting with you guys again. I'm looking forward to debating about the pros and cons about designer babies. And just in terms of time, so you guys know how long you have. For the three main topics, we're going to begin with economical and then go to social and finally ethical. And it's going to be 3-minute speeches for each. After that, we're going to have 35 minutes for the rebuttal period, and that's going to end approximately at 4:25. And I will be giving the 5-minute warning just so you guys know. You'll probably have maybe 2 to 3 more points to get in after I give that warning. So I'm going to start with the economical pro side, which is our side. So I will start then, and then you guys can present the con side of it.
Perfect, thank you.
Right. So designer babies have many economical benefits, such as helping us continue to increase the technological advancements, saving families money on treatments for genetic diseases, and helping the future generations' economy. Firstly, legalizing this technology would cause an influx of people going into this field. This increase would allow for more ideas to be generated, and it would allow for this technology to increase. Also, if it was legal, there's a possibility of receiving more funding from the government to continue to prosper. This would cause an increase in the research of these advancements. One such disease that genome editing helps fight off is cancer. CRISPR technology gives scientists the ability to edit out the mutated cancer gene and replace it with a healthy gene. While this technology is not completely perfected, increasing the funding and the amount of people going into genome editing opens up more possibilities to develop this technology. I know that does not relate directly to designer babies. What I'm stating is that if we were to legalize this process, we would allow more people to go into the field of genome editing in general, and it would help to develop this technology. Also, while legalizing this process helps to increase technology advancements, it will also help families save monies on treating genetic diseases. Having the option to alter the genetic makeup of a baby would help to filter out unwanted genetic conditions. Saving money on treatments of these disorders, such as Down syndrome, sickle cell, and Turner syndrome, will help save the families money. These types of diseases cost families and the governments hundreds of thousands of dollars every year to treat them. Also, since the government will not have to spend as much money treating these diseases because they will eventually may get cured if we do spend a lot of technology and money in this field, in this job market, It will help so that they can create a subsidy, the government can create a subsidy to lower class families to help them to afford these treatments for their children. This will allow for society to continue to progress further and prosper in the future. This brings me to my third point, that this technology would allow for the betterment of the future. When expanding any market, this comes the increase in the supply for jobs. By legalizing this process, we as a society will erase the stigma surrounding this topic and allow for people to become more willing to go through this process. This will create jobs because the demand for this type of doctor will increase. This will decrease unemployment, which overall will help the society in the future. Therefore, we should legalize designer babies and remove the stigma around them, as it will be economically beneficial to society. Thank you. And now we will hear from the con side for the economical arguments.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Rodriguez will be presenting our speech on the economic aspect of this debate. To respond to some of the arguments made by the pro side. The pro side has presented an argument saying that it will increase life expectancy and that there will be a positive influence on classes as they could help ensure stability as well as health for members of all classes. To that, we'd like to respond that there are real consequences to genetically modified babies. And primarily, here's our first point. Man is not perfect. Science has always revolved around the idea of trial and error. Currently, the field of study is not very broad nor experienced. Now, the person has tried to present an argument on genome editing. However, as they did acknowledge, it is not the same. Genetic engineers are not perfect people and cannot 100% properly evaluate every gene. They are more than likely to make a mistake, and because genetically modified babies haven't been something that has been practiced commonly or for a long time, we cannot ensure that every single baby is going to be protected and healthy. So advancement in innovation is just not enough justification for the loss of human lives and the grief of parents. And just because a doctor promised a perfect baby doesn't mean that they can ensure that to be a perfect delivery. So you may be asking, how does this tie to the economic aspect of our argument? Well, to that, we'd like to argue that with imperfect balance, there's also the open door for corruption. If doctors can't ensure a perfect product from the very beginning, then they can take that opportunity and continue to have operations and performances in order to have more money coming in. Now, like I said, it's something that will lead down to a slippery slope, and it's something that cannot be completely ensured. So as we go down that path, there would be a violation of rights as well as a lot of lawsuits. And since we're discussing the economic aspects behind this new technology, then we have to come in and say that there are more cons that there are pros, and that over time this could become more expensive than actual helpful to any members of any class. And when it comes down to the morality of things, it does collude with the economic aspects. That being that if we were to go down this path, we would also be allowing for a division between two classes of people to become normal. We would basically be allowing for genetically modified babies to be, over time, the majority, or not the majority, but at least hold the most amount of influence in society. And so therefore, it would leave members of the lower classes behind, just because we cannot ensure that everyone would be willing to help members of the lower class and ensure that everyone is on the same place. Do you have any questions?
No, I think we're okay. Thank you for your speech. So we will be moving on just to the social pro and con, and then going to ethical, and then we will start a rebuttal period.
Okay.
So we will hear from the social side for pros.
Okay, designer babies should be an available option as they can result in social benefits like helping society progress even further. For example, modifying genes to increase the level of a baby's intelligence means that they will have a greater chance of contributing to society's knowledge on many different fields of study. This increase in knowledge can then benefit society, as there would be a greater chance of encountering scientific breakthroughs and inventions like finding alternative and accessible cures for diseases and illnesses for everyone. So these designer babies can ultimately end up helping the entirety of society, even if not everyone is a designer baby in the future. Even more, If the government were to focus on spending less money on researching cures for diseases, since designer babies would be a plausible option that could get rid of certain genetic disorders and diseases, the government would also be able to focus more on funding research for different problems in the world, which would then again benefit society as a whole, as these treatments would be more accessible for the entirety of everyone to access. Thank you.
Thank you, and we will hear from your con side for the social argument.
Okay. One of our members of our team is actually sick, so I'll be stepping in to fill in for him today, if that's okay. All right.
Yeah, of course, that's okay.
All right, perfect. So when we're talking about the social cons to genetically modified babies, we also have to look at the ideals of what would be viewed as perfection, what could be viewed as beauty. And by doing so, we would basically be idealizing an actual image and trying to do our best to perfect that image rather than focusing on helping those that we can't help now. So a lot of the arguments that the pro has presented were based around the idea that in the future, somewhere, sometime, we would be able to help members of the lower class. If we have those mediums now, rather than spending money on new research, why not help them using the money that is available now to invest in that research and help the members of the lower class right now? There's no reason as to why we should invest money on new advancements that would allow for members of the lower class to continue to stay behind and be stagnated when we could be helping them now. A lot of that could be presented with the contention that this could all happen in the future. And again, like I said, the key word is could, because if they had those intentions to help the lower classes, they would do something as of right now. There would be no need for legalization and to go through the process of actually genetically modifying babies. And the reason why is because society isn't about spending money. It starts with the people first. And so if we're going down this path of how researchers and how members of the upper class are willing to donate money and to be able to participate in certain studies and research to further advance this technology, as well as improve the quality of life of all citizens, well then we could do so right now by just allowing to, or just presenting more people that would be willing to donate money as of right now, like in the status quo, not in the future. So what we mean by the social problems here is that this would lead down a slippery slope by following an appeal to future that only focuses on helping the rich and then focusing on the poor, if that makes sense. So the way the pro is presenting it is that, yeah, the poor need help, but we'll help them along the way. And by that point, they will be further behind than what they already are today. And that's why it's such a social problem that we cannot allow for genetically modified babies to become a commonality. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So now we're going to be moving to the ethical pro and then the con for that.
Ethical. Currently, there are thousands of genetic disorders in humans, and the number increases annually. In fact, there are over 6,000 single gene disorders. However, there are even more with multi-genes. With designer babies and being able to modify gene sequences in humans, babies normally born with abnormalities can have a chance at normal life. Having this option available, yet denying it to the child, is ethically wrong. Cystic fibrosis, a fatal single-gene disorder, can be diagnosed for a child before birth. A parent with such a case should be given the option to modify this gene in order to prevent such a case from occurring, let alone having to parent a child with this abnormality. This has already become a possibility with mitochondrial transfer. Many times, mitochondrial DNA is passed down from mother to child, which results in a transfer of defects from mother to child. However, with this technology, defects can be avoided. Ultimately, the question arises, if parents have the ability to prevent disorders such as cystic fibrosis, shouldn't parents get the chance to prevent their child suffering and be able to design their babies?
Thank you. the con side for ethical arguments.
The unborn child doesn't have any options or say if they want to be a certain way or look a certain way if they had a choice. What would we do this to them? Tamper with an innocent life to be socially accepted by our society. Most people refer them as the future generation and think about the world, money, and what the future holds, and etc. But the individual's life is being affected. Also, bullying today is already an issue and responsible for a lot of hard judged lives for being different. What happens if a person can afford to be born amazing at something and genetically perfect in a crowd of people who can't? What will that lead to? Fewer people being born naturally on odds of getting disease, but pray not to. This will be our new society, our new leaders. People also look at this the way we are playing God, choosing the characteristics that are normally chosen at random based on their parents' traits, not what the parents want for their perfect child. A child is supposed to be reflected on their parents, the looks and the little things that were taught from them, not what they were created to do in the lab. They have the right and will have one day an opinion, but what happens if they didn't want to be a certain way and not to be anything like their parents? It's not fair. They have someone to blame if they were created in a lab, but if it was completely natural, they will learn to accept themselves. Although designer babies have been created and served as a living example, the technology is still not 100% safe. What are the odds that something could go wrong in one of the procedures involved? And this is because the technology is still in an experimental stage. It will be hard to tell them if the modification process has affected the baby's gene pool, which could cause problems down the family tree. The people who perform the evaluation process factors in as well, as geneticists can also make mistakes. Errors are sure to happen at some point. Also, genes could have more than one use. One gene could be in control of both intelligence and anger management, meaning that a designer baby could be very smart but also very angry. My next point is moral and ethical implication after the embryocystic cells are removed and used in this section process. Those who are not chosen will be discarded from that opponents of designer babies likened to abortion. That has also been cases where designer babies were created just for the stem cells. After the cells are extracted, the babies are given up for adoption or aborted, depending on the situation. What's even worse is that the donors of the stem cells are doing it for the money with no regard for the life loss. However, proponents argue that modifying genetic makeup is no different from telling that an expectant mother to increase her folate intake to ensure proper child development and lower risk of autism. After all, this is still concerned medication alteration. So why is it less unethical?
Okay. Okay, thank you so much for that. So we will be transitioning to our rebuttal period. It's going to end, it's going to end at approximately 4:15, and I will be giving the 5-minute warning. We're going to have a 35-minute rebuttal period. So we will begin right now.
All right, thank you. So first of all, we want to address the point that was made earlier on in one of the speeches in which it was said that we can't guarantee a perfect delivery. So what's the point of genetically modifying a child? And we just want to address the fact that a perfect delivery is not guaranteed despite whether or not the baby has had any genetic modifications. So it's unfair for us to say that just because we can't guarantee a perfect delivery, we shouldn't try and help the child as much as we can. Thank you.
To respond to that point, the reason why I made that point was because if the whole purpose of the actual process is to ensure that the baby's perfect, then not only have you costed the parents an insane amount of money that would only be available for those in the upper class, but also you have costed 2 lives. So if the delivery is not perfect, then clearly on an economic basis, then this shouldn't even be an option. Secondly, the reason why we also made that argument is because it ties into our argument of corruption. Because let's say that scientists are saying that because nothing is perfect, they can continue to have processes in which they can say that something went wrong and continue to have money being paid towards them, because they said from the very beginning that parents shouldn't have such high expectations because, again, nothing is perfect. And the reason why we point this out is because there hasn't been many practices yet that have shown or proven to be successful, and that's because there are moral and ethical dilemmas as well. Does that answer your question?
So just to address what you've just said about money being wasted if it doesn't work, parents that undergo IVF do it in an attempt to have a child, and when it doesn't work, I don't think they consider it a waste of money or a waste of a life. They do it in an attempt to have a baby, and it is for this reason that we can't just consider like them trying to make their child's life or trying to make a child in general a waste.
Right, but IVF is very different from what? CRISPR. Yeah, like the whole process is very different from the actual baby being genetically modified. Like, the reason why we make that argument is because, like we said, it's something that has, again, both ethical and moral dilemmas, and it hasn't been shown to have been successful yet, and you have no evidence of ensuring that that can be the case.
Hi, so just going on to an earlier point, actually the same point. You're talking about creating the perfect child, but having a designer baby may not actually mean creating the perfect baby. It may mean getting rid of a gene that carries a disease that runs through the family. It may be getting rid of a cancerous gene that people within that family are prone to get. So more about that, designer babies are meant to ensure that hopefully the next child born won't have to suffer like past family members.
Well, that's why in our speech we defined that to be what genetically modified babies were. So in our speech we made sure to define it as the genetically modification of a baby to ensure that they have the ideal baby, as I said in my speech. And again, this leads down to corruption, because after a while, doctors are going to see a window of opportunity in which they can continue to have parents pay for a process that ultimately may not even work.
And while we do understand, obviously, the waste of a human life to get the perfect baby, as you're stating, would be devastating, what we're saying is, another point that we can bring up is, there's always going to be error whenever you're trying to, sorry, I just heard feedback myself, my bad. There's always going to be error when you try something like this. What we're saying is, if we keep working at it, obviously we're not going to make it legal unless we're sure that it is a high degree of babies are okay. What we're saying is, another thing you have to take into consideration is, when we put more fundraising, when we erase the stigma around designer babies, more jobs will be created, because there's less stigma around this market, and so more people will be willing to go into it. We'd have more manpower going into this market to ensure that there's more technology, there's more development in this area, to ensure that there is a lot more, it's a safer process than something like now. What we're saying is, if we were to make it legal right now, it would help to ensure that the market does expand, and we'd have more people to ensure that it is developed.
And we'd also like to make a point as to, why are we so afraid of medical advancements? Why are we so afraid to give this a shot? If every other person behind us was afraid to make any sort of advancement in the medical industry, we wouldn't have the medicines that we do today that help people survive past these disabilities. What we're trying to do is make sure that everybody has an equal opportunity at great health in their life, so that they can accomplish anything that anyone wants to do.
Well, to that, we'd like to respond that based on your previous argument about how just because it's not safe doesn't mean that we shouldn't invest money in it. Like, again, like, that just proves our entire point, our entire contention that man is not perfect. Like, the whole reason why we brought it up is because it is dangerous, and it is something that we have to take into account when we're setting the economical basis of the argument. Now, to respond to your question, the reason why we are not for it is because, like you said, you're trying to attract. But you said you were trying to attract manpower to the market. Essentially, you're putting a price on a human life. So the reason why we're not making this a marketing deal is because that would lead us down the slippery slope of corruption, which goes back to our argument. There shouldn't be a price on a human life. Like that should just not be an issue to be in discussion today. That's morally unacceptable. So by arguing that, you would be basically alluding to an elitist society in which only the rich should advance and only the rich should be for the advancement and improvement of human life. Because like I said before, if we allow them to continue, then we would be leaving behind the lower classes and they would stay behind much further than what they are currently.
So, of course, we all agree here that we would never put a price on a human life, ever. But what we're saying is, we're not looking at it in terms of this is a market that will create more jobs. We're looking at it in terms of if we erase the stigma around this, it will attract more people to.
I never said that it was a market for raising jobs. That's something you brought up in one of your previous arguments. You said that the whole goal about genetically modified genes behind advancing medical practice is to attract more research as well as manpower to the market. So you created this market argument that has us in this discussion today.
So that wasn't the basis of the whole argument. We'd like to clarify that. It was one of the points that we made and one of the points that we addressed in our speech. It wasn't the basis of bringing up and legalizing genetically modified babies.
We're saying that it would help the economic market. It's one of the reasons, but it's definitely not the main reason that we want designer babies, but it's one of the things that would help the market, would help the economic market if we were to introduce this and we would raise the stigma or lessen the stigma around it, because it will help it will help to decrease unemployment, which will help future generations, because the unemployment rate in both Canada and America is quite high right now. And just to address something that was brought up before about how we're going to create corruption, about how only the rich will be able to afford the designer babies. While maybe at the starting that may be true, one thing that you have to take into consideration is that if we were to invest more technology, if we were to invest more people into this, what would happen is we would hopefully create a development. We would hopefully maybe cure a disease using this type of technology. And what would happen is if we were to be able to cure a disease such as, let's say, Turner's, for example, what would happen is a lot of people would be willing to, I would say the government wouldn't have to spend as much money on the Turner's genome disease because it is curable right now. We would be able to save money. The families would be able to save money by helping to ensure that they get this genome editing inside for that. And also one thing that we could bring up is that if the government didn't have to put so much money into this disease, they could use some of that money to possibly create a subsidy in the future for families, for lower class families who may not be able to afford to undergo this procedure. If they're able to use this money to create a subsidy, that they won't have to invest so much into Turner's disease, for example, or there are many other diseases that I could bring up. They wouldn't have to invest as much money into that, and they could use this money to create a subsidy for the lower class families.
We have to realize that, though, it's not under the government's control anymore at that point. We have to, a current gene editing tool, which is CRISPR, or Cas9, a company that does gene editing. It's not under the government's control. At that point, it's filed under a patent itself, and so they can price it at whatever price they choose to. Now, there are other examples in previous cases where there was gene editing used, and it was outrageously expensive. There was a case where a single shot was around $1 million for the gene editing tool, and that was outrageously expensive, and it went off of the market because no one could afford it, of course. These types of gene editing tools and designer baby products are extremely expensive, and they're held under patents, which no one else can use in terms of usability and being able to be shared throughout the economy. It can't be done that way because it's held under a patent that is only owned by one person and one corporation itself.
And in addition, like most of your contentions are based on this utopian society in which the rich would be willing to help the poor. That's not the case. I mean, if that were the case, then we wouldn't be in the division of classes that we are in today. If they were so willing to just donate money and share it to ensure that all citizens and all
Can you guys still hear us?
there's like another
So while we did not say that the rich would be. So while we aren't. Sorry, is that me? Sorry, I wasn't sure if the feedback was myself or not. Just give me a second.
back to what we were saying. If
Sorry, it was just I guess a technical difficulty on our side. But what we were saying is we're not, our plan to create a subsidy isn't contingent upon the rich donating money. What we're saying is the money that the government would save on having to invest a lot of money into diseases to find a cure for these diseases, they won't have to do that if we find a cure using designer babies, using the CRISPR-Cas system as you guys brought up. They wouldn't have to invest so much money if we could find a cure using that. So what would happen is we would use the money that the government would save to provide a subsidy to afford having the privatization of the CRISPR-Cas system. They provide a subsidy to these people, the government, not contingent upon the richer people donating money. The government could provide a subsidy because from the money that they would save by not having to invest as much into technology for the for genome editing in general.
But in that case, you would.
In addition, regardless of it. Sorry. Okay. You can continue.
So what we're trying to argue here is that we cannot put and place all of our hopes in the government. Like, for example, here in the U.S., a lot of people don't even have health care, or they don't have accessibility to health care. So this contention that the government's going to save money and all of a sudden allow for parents to have the opportunity to ensure that the kids are healthy and grow up healthy because they genetically modify those babies is simply unimaginable. Like, that's not something that we can even think about right now. And in addition, much of the contentions are just an appeal to future. No evidence would be enough or sufficient to show that essentially the government could come up with a plan that all members could agree with, and that would allow it to legalize it.
Okay, moving aside from privatized versus government, just in general, if we do have the possibility of having a cure or having a way to stop a specific disorder from occurring, we should be giving the parents the right to, before their child is born, to rid the child of any of these disorders and change up the genetic modeling of the child to stop the suffering and overall help the child who's coming into the world. Thank you.
Of course, if they create a cure for a type of disease or something, of course, it's a great finding. But again, that cure won't be under the government's hand. It'll be under the company who created the gene editing tool's hand. And therefore, whatever's created or whatever cure is made out of it, they hold the rights to price it, to use it at their expense, however they want to. They can choose outrageous prices like how it is to use gene editing at the moment. And so it won't fall into the government's hand to control the prices and stuff. That's $1 million. Oh.
So you're talking about these privatized companies, right? But let's take CRISPR for example. Even if we did, even if they're only allowing it at their own expense to only a limited amount of people, regardless, there's still an option available to parents. Is it ethically right for us to deny a parent from that choice to help their own child?
But again, this option will only be available to those who can afford it. Again, this is extremely outrageously priced, and not everybody can afford it. People in a lower class situation will not be able to afford this type of gene editing process that is extremely expensive. And
while we do agree that it would be harder for a lower class family to afford this type of medication. Is it fair to completely get rid of the possibility that yes, a richer family may be able to afford this, but is it fair for them to have their child have this disease, and not be able to cure it, to take away their right to have this?
Well, in that case, what happens with the minority then? What happens with the lower classes? So are we just supposed to stand back and say, oh, because the opportunity is there, they should totally take it? No, some things that are available don't mean that they should be done.
Exactly, because then we create an economic gap and a social inequality in both situations.
No, in fact, there is already an economic gap, and you would only be worsening it.
Like, we already have a social inequality and an economic gap that would only worsen with the process of gene editing.
And would lead back to our argument of a division between excluding people that would continue to be for as long as time in that case. Because let's be honest, if parents were able to afford the cure, they wouldn't want their kids to commingle with other members of society that are not cured or don't have immunity yet. Because in that case, that would just there wouldn't have been a purpose to ensuring that the genes would be kept safe. They would just want for their kids to procreate with members that are already immune, so that their grandkids and family further along the line will continue to be healthy.
Also, that'll create bullying, and like in our society today, kids are still getting bullied for what they are, either if they're whatever their race is or what social class they are. And if we have designer babies, that will affect our children. That would affect non-designer babies because they would think that they're less. Would you want that for our society?
It will bring down their low self-esteem within themselves, thinking that they are not good enough because of the people who are genetically modified. They think that they are less than them, and that is something that will create a more divide in our society than it already is. Thank you.
Right, so we'd like to remind everybody here today that our job isn't to solve the issues between class divides or those that are richer or poor, but our job here is to make sure that we provide as much medical care as possible. We give options to people, and we'd like to acknowledge that we understand your point where you said that they wouldn't allow their children to hang out with somebody that had that disease, but who a parent chooses to let their child hang out with is a product of their environment and what they grow up in, and that can change regardless of whether or not a child has been genetically modified. And we'd like to acknowledge that instead of like the rich spending the money later on in life treating their child or whatever family member has the disease that they do, they're doing it at the beginning. So we're not saying that you're spending more money, we're just getting it done head on.
And to go back to the class divide, we're also stating that, yes, it may create more of a stigma around the parents don't want them to hang out with someone who doesn't have this perfect genome, as we're saying, but that's the parents' choice. It's going to happen regardless. There are already people of higher class who don't want their child to hang out with someone from a lower class or from a place where they're not from. That's the parents' decision. It's going to be there regardless of if they have had their genes edited or not. That's going to be already in place. It doesn't matter if the child is their definition of perfect. They already think like that. They already think we have the money to have this, as you're talking about, only the rich will be able to afford this. Those parents may already think, even if this process never happened, my child is better because we have the money. They wouldn't want to associate with the lower class people. So by saying that because they're creating a perfect baby, they wouldn't want their child to hang out with someone who has another disease, that may already be taking place because richer parents may already think like that, regardless if they've gone through this process or not.
In that case, you're not wrong. We agree with you. But the problem is that in your speeches, you made an argument that this would be beneficial on a social as well as ethical basis. In that case, if you're agreeing to those, then are we supposed to accept that you have essentially given up those points? And are you just arguing on an economical basis now?
We're still arguing that it is ethically and socially correct in order to have these designer babies.
That wasn't a problem that you were going to solve today. And given that the pro has conceded those 2 points, we would more than likely agree with that.
Sorry, we'd appreciate it if our person could finish their point.
Um, oh,
So we weren't giving up our points before. What we were stating simply before that is that it doesn't fully matter if so we were basically rebuttaling your point that you brought up where this would create a bigger class divide. What we're saying is there's already a class divide. Having this in place, I don't think it would create a bigger class divide, because what would happen is those rich parents already believe that because of their money, or I'm not stereotyping rich parents, but if you were saying that if they had the designer baby, they would believe their child is the best child ever and they wouldn't want them to associate with someone who hasn't had this process done, they may already think like that without this process happening. They might already think that we have the money, my child has designer clothes, goes to a great school, a plethora of other things. They may already think like that, and so they may not want their child to associate with the lower class, regardless of if they had a designer baby or not. If that's what they believe is that if my child has something that another child doesn't, they shouldn't hang out with that child, regardless if they had a designer baby or not. That's their thought process already. So we're not getting rid of all our points. We were simply rebuttaling what you said before of how this would create a larger class divide, because it wouldn't, because the parents would already think like that, regardless if they had designer babies or not.
Giving them more of an opportunity, giving them more of an option to say that, well, my baby is genetically modified. And these genetically modified babies are going to grow up in the rich society, meaning that they'd have more of these high-class jobs. So the people who are not genetically modified will see that, and they will see like, well, can I not do that because I'm not genetically modified? It will, again, bring down low self-esteem and create more division in the society that we already have. It will create a bigger division in our society.
well, you can actually say that about our modern society, even today, without any of the gene editing. You look at these. You talk about the division between the lower class and the higher class. And the higher class, despite whether they have genome editing or not, they have the money to treat these disorders and diseases. If it's not before the baby's born, it's going to be after. So there will still be a division between the lower class and the upper class, as the upper class will have the money available to treat their children, and that children could be differentiated from the lower class children, because that children is now treated because their parents have the money to do so. So that division between the lower class and the upper class exists regardless of whether there is a genome editing or not. But this, having this genome editing makes sure that the baby doesn't suffer later on in its life, because yeah, which would be ethically better. Wouldn't you want someone to be given the option to live a better life from the get-go than like treating it later on?
That it's only for the rich now. It's only for the rich, meaning that the lower class will not be able to move up. The lower class will still stay where they are, and the rich will stay rich and the poor will stay poor.
It's basically eugenics. Like,
Okay, so you're saying that the rich will eventually become richer while the poor will remain poor. However, let's take this in a different context. Let's see that some people right now can't afford cancer treatments. And just because some people can't afford cancer treatments, you're trying to say that everyone should be denied it because it's not right just for some to have the few cases who are going to end suffering. In general, I'm trying to state how.
This opportunity, we're just saying that providing the current opportunity of gene editing will only increase an economic gap due to the fact that it's extremely expensive and not everybody will have that opportunity. We want people to have the opportunity to be able to afford these types of expenses and these medical aids that will help them live longer and help them live happier lives, but not at the risk where only the rich can afford it and the people who cannot use it.
All right, so in terms of looking at physical appearances, it's important to note that even now after birth, rich people or anyone for that matter that's able to afford it is able to change their physical appearances through plastic surgery to match their definition of perfection. But we want to focus more on the medical aspect of it and making someone's life more.
Someone is able to go through a life where they won't have to suffer with any diseases or illnesses that have caused pain to another family member or anyone that they know or anyone in life in general.
What about eugenics?
Sorry, can you repeat that really quickly? We couldn't catch it.
Is that there's a strong correlation between designer babies and eugenics, in which you're trying to create a certain type of perfection, which isn't achievable due to the fact that you'll lead to different types of disparities and gaps between in a social way and in an economic way.
In general, within society, perfection is just not one look. Everyone thinks of perfection in a different way. It varies from person to person, and just because you think something is perfect does not mean the next person will think the same thing is perfect. Everything changes, such as just like ideas.
Of course, perfection is different to the eye.
Oh, and then when you're
you have to note that due to the environment in which we are, they create an idea of what perfection is. So it's not the individual itself, but it's the world we live in which has created a certain idea of perfection, and it's what we've fallen into and become trapped in.
Sorry, could you repeat that last point? We had some technical difficulties. It sounded very muffled.
Again, we note that perfection is not created by an individual, and it can be viewed differently by an individual. But the fact is that the perfection was created by the world around us, and it's spread by the media. The media tells us what is perfect and what is not, and that is put into our minds and put into our brains, and it tells us how we should be perfect in any way.
And a lot of the social media you brought up, a lot of those people, and I'm not generalizing, but a lot of them do go through stuff such as plastic surgery to get that perfect ideal look. So what we're stating is, if you're stating that we shouldn't have designer babies because people can create what they believe is their perfect kid or their perfect person, we're stating that that can be achieved through plastic surgery. That can be achieved through changing facial structures, through changing the way you look to achieve the ideal level of perfection. So what we're stating is, if you're saying that not the only, but one of the reasons why we shouldn't have designer babies is because they can create a eugenic society, they can create something that a perfect society, and using social media and using that stigma around it, what we're saying is that they can do the same thing through plastic surgery. They can get the ideal look through plastic surgery. So there's no, I believe that point can be invalid in a way, because that can be achieved through plastic surgery as well.
And one of the things that was mentioned earlier on in the opening speech was that if a child is born natural and not from a lab, then they will accept themselves. And to just talk about that argument, a lot of self-esteem issues happen because people don't like the way they look. What they do is they use plastic surgery to fix this, and this is an option that is made available to them. In doing so, they're fixing their physical appearance, and they're not letting, they're using their own judgment. So it's important to note that, like, that change still happens, and just because a person is born naturally doesn't always necessarily mean that they like their appearance.
And I'm just gonna, we have a 5 minute warning. I'm gonna say probably 2 to 3 more points in. Just wanted to give you guys a heads up, but please.
Respond to your argument right now, like the last point. In response to your last argument, I mean, it's very clear that you chose plastic surgery as an example, significantly because you seem to value opinion a lot and the choice of that. If that's the case, well, plastic surgery is the opinion of the actual individual. With baby and engineering and genetically modified babies, it's the parents choosing for the kid. So what happens with the children's rights? In that case, would you be, on an ethical as well as a moral perspective, are you willing to give away children's rights to parents?
So at this point, the child is still within, when we're talking about any type of genetic modification, it's happening prior to the birth. So the baby's still a fetus. And in many cases, if you search up laws regarding babies right now, there is the right for parents to be the ones that are choosing until they're born.
So are you trying to say that fetus don't have rights?
Sorry, I'm gonna cut it off there. Let's say we have a strict rule. We're not gonna get into that at all. I'm just gonna stop it there. I know that both sides brought up points about that, but we're not gonna foster that discussion. We will move on to another point right now. Sorry, I'm gonna cut it off there.
Again, what you were saying about that the child might have low self-esteem because they were born naturally, or they won't have low self-esteem if they were born naturally. Who is to say that these children were genetically modified, but yet they still grow up feeling like they're not happy with themselves? That still will create like, well, why did my mom like genetically modify me? Like, was I not perfect enough, or would she not have loved me if I still have these disabilities?
All right, so one of the things that it's important to note that a lot of problems that stem with self-image is usually a product of mental health, and that's not what we're attempting to resolve with genetic modification. We're attempting to resolve problems that affect all people, and mental health can impact people regardless of what they look like. So no matter what, it would affect them, and we're not saying that we can fix that. We're saying that we're trying to make their life more livable.
So you were saying that earlier that you're not 100% sure that that the technology will work out and that these genetically modified babies will actually work. So what if there is defects, and what if it does actually affect their physical look and their appearance? So it's not just a mental thing, it's an actual physical thing.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
As we were saying,
Reiterate your point.
I'm sorry, what?
Could you repeat that or reiterate your point?
Basically, I said that you said that there is like not a possible chance that these genetically modified babies will work. Meaning, because there is a fact in the technology and that may not work out. So what if there is defects when it comes to these genetically modified babies, meaning like they might have something physically wrong with them? So it's not just a mental thing anymore, it's actual physical appearance. Sorry, I have to go.
Okay, bye.
Oh. Sorry, is everyone done, or
No,
like is this a bell I heard, or?
We just
Okay.
switched out.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, we weren't sure because we heard the bell. That being said, there's a minute left, so if anyone has something to say or something to rebuttal, you can bring it up now, but it's probably like.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
And the last question is, on March the 4th, what topic are we supposed to be arguing? I'm kind of confused.
Yeah, of course. So we had already debated marijuana with another country, and so we wanted to do something different. So we did say that we could do psychopaths, nature versus nurture. However, talking to Mr. Ellis, he did say that you guys were very interested in debating marijuana. So if you guys do want to do that, we are okay to debate marijuana. If you guys are, if that's a topic you're interested in, it's up to you guys.
Yeah, we could, if we could do that, that'd be fine for public policy. I just want to do it before you found out. I'm also interested about your argument on plastic surgery. Could you repeat what you were saying on that plastic surgery argument? I didn't catch all of it.
So what we were saying was to rebuttal the point about how designer babies a parent is able to create the perfect baby and the perfect genetic looks. How we're saying that is that's also achievable, and you were saying how it would create a eugenic society and how it would create a perfect society. What we're saying is a lot of the influence is off of social media right now, and a lot of people are using plastic surgery to create their idea of the perfect person, their own perfect self. And so what we're saying was that one of the points about how having the perfect baby would result off of using this genome editing technology, you can achieve that also through plastic surgery. So we're focusing on maybe not always focusing on the looks side of it, because that can be resolved through plastic surgery, but looking at curing these diseases through this technology also, not just looking at the
on one
looks.
side of the aspect. We care much more about than just the look itself. What we were basically arguing was saying that either type of procedure that you choose to do on the baby before it's born, it's gonna only be able to be afforded by the rich again. Even if you have it, even if it is plastic surgery itself is still expensive later on in life.
It's not as expensive.
It's not as expensive as gene editing, which not everyone will be able to afford. And I think that's where our main argument, that we were just stating that it's an extremely expensive procedure that not everyone will be able to afford. And there are different treatments that go after it, even when you've done the gene editing procedure. So, yeah.
So that's a valid point, but we're gonna cut off the rebuttal period right now just because we're a bit over time. We're gonna move on to the conclusions. So we will start with the consides since we started with the introductions first.
In conclusion, we'd like to thank you for presenting all of the arguments. We believe that the concide has won, as we have established that there are economic costs as well as ethical and social costs that are unbearable and that should not have place in our society today. And so for those reasons, genetically modified babies, or at least the idea of it, shouldn't be legalized yet unless there is enough evidence to provide that it's a safe procedure, a procedure that can be accessible to everyone without giving an unfair advantage to the already elite. Thank you.
Allowing people the opportunity to create a designer baby will result in more gains than losses. Designer babies will ensure that the health of future children will prosper and rid them of diseases that may cause them to suffer. Being able to design a child can help the economy flourish by spending less money on treatments for diseases that can be prevented. And by creating breakthroughs in technology, designer babies can help society become more advanced to become a utopia where all citizens are benefiting. To conclude, people should have the option to design their baby. Thank you for having this debate, Texas. We enjoyed hearing your arguments and are excited for our next debate with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
All right, bye. Have a good day. You too.
Bye.
Thanks, Mike.
Yo, thank you. But hey,